that? Is this the end of the road for Vijay Mallya, or does he have enough legal options to get out of this mess? Joining us now are two legal eagles who are no stranger to such long-drawn and complicated legal battles. KTS Tulsi, Supreme Court lawyer, and Aman Lekhi. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on the show. Mr. Tulsi, let me start by asking you, the Attorney General in court today saying that the government doesn't even know if Vijay Mallya is in fact in London. In fact, Mr. Rodke being quoted as saying he has tremendous assets there. We know he would be there most likely. What could be the way forward given what has transpired in court today in the Mallya matter?
See, the road forward will depend on why all this happened. Is this a sheer case of mere incompetence, or is it something worse? If it is incompetence, maybe the government can conduct the rest of the proceedings more competently. But if it is something worse, then there is no hope. The government already seems to be doing too little and too late. The offences under the Money Laundering Act were not registered. I don't know why. Why did they not impound the passport? Why did they wait for him to just flee? Or was he given a tip-off? So this is shocking for a government whose first priority was being able to track black money. Now, there is not only a question of Lalit Modi being protected.
But Mr. Tulsi, you're making an allegation here. You're assuming that it is black money, sir, and that has not been proven by anyone so far.
You see, what else would it be? If he has assets, is the law so incompetent? The law is not impotent? How is it that he has taken dozens of loans, given his personal guarantees, apart from the trademark which was nothing but junk? Now, that's what my information is gathered only from the internet. The internet shows that there were personal guarantees given by Mr. Vijay Mallya, and then why did the banks not enforce those guarantees? What have they been doing, particularly this government, which came into power on the promise of being able to track black money?
Sure, but this raises the larger...
Earlier we have seen...
But this raises the larger question about the banks, Mr. Tulsi, because again, I'm quoting the Attorney General, Mr. Rodke, and when the court asked Mr. Rodke that how is it that unsecured loans were given where there was no secured assets on these loans, Mr. Rodke is apparently replying in that case saying that the Kingfisher Airlines was a brand at its peak which had assets worth some 1,000 crore rupees, and then it crashed. So that's the argument that's been presented by the Attorney General in court. So it also begs the question, why did banks loan the money?
No, of course that's a question. But the question also is that was this government serious at all from the beginning to the end of being able to track black money? What happened to Lalit Modi's case? What happened to the Chief Minister of Rajasthan, son, whose company in which there was so much money?
No, but let's not digress. Let's not digress into Vasundhara Raje and Lalit Modi, sir. Let's talk about the case at hand, which is Vijay Mallya. The Enforcement Directorate and the CBI have only just begun their probe into the matter. So the allegation that this is black money is only an allegation at this point in time. So what would be the road ahead as far as...
If it has just begun the probe, that itself raises question. How is it that they just begun the probe? These employees of Kingfisher have been agitating, and they have been in public view all these years. Since 2011 they have been agitating about not being able to get their salaries. And this government has been in power now close to 3 years. And yet, you see, I'm not saying that he is guilty. I'm only saying that these are the allegations which are there in the public domain.
Sure, but Mr. Tulsi,
Now,
Mr. Tulsi, let me ask you a pointed question. So, Mr. Mallya has put out a press release a couple of days ago on the back of the arrangement that has been arrived at with Diageo, and also responding to the allegations that have been made in public. And Mr. Mallya in that has said that he is not a personal defaulter, suggesting that there are no personal guarantees that could be invoked by banks. If that is the case, what can be the recourse as far as banks are concerned?
No. Every person, does any person accused of a crime says that am I guilty? Is an accused entitled to give a certificate of not being intentional defaulter?
No, I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying that if there were no personal guarantees, what would be the recourse then for banks?
You may be knowing that there are no personal guarantees. I gather from the net that there are personal guarantees given to 17 banks. And the same trademarks have been pledged to each of those banks without informing the other. These are major frauds, not one, not two, but dozens of frauds. Each one of them will run a punishment of 7 years plus. And then money laundering, not attracted. Abatement to Corruption Prevention or Corruption Act cases, not invoked. What does one gather from this kind of kid glove treatment that is being given by the government to a person who became the king of frauds from king of good times?
So what can we expect now? Because Mr. Rodke in court, the Attorney General also saying that we're not baying for Mr. Mallya's blood. We want him to sit across the table and settle with banks. So are we looking at a prospect of Mr. Mallya's, I mean, he's already left the country at this point in time. We don't know whether he's in London or any part of the world. But
the bird has flown.
What would this mean?
You see, this means that the bird has flown. After you have facilitated the escape of someone, now you just can go on making noises and make a pretense and find other scapegoats for sending them to jail. But the main architect of these frauds, if at all they are frauds, he is not there. He is absconder. He perhaps will lead a life of a fugitive.
Let me bring in Aman Lekhi. Aman Lekhi, there are several ifs as far as this particular matter is concerned, but let's talk about the most recent development, which is the arrangement that Vijay Mallya has arrived at with Diageo. As per our understanding and as per the public release that's been put out by both parties, $40 million of the $75 million was to be paid to Mr. Mallya immediately. What recourse do banks have now in this matter?
No, as far as the recourse the banks are concerned, two very pertinent questions arise. One, why now? And two, why Mallya alone? This deals with systematic corruption in the banking system as such, because the total recoveries are about 4 lakh crores. And the problem with our country is the tokenism, because today all of us are obsessed with Mallya. The question is, Mallya, along with the others, because the list just came out of the Bank Association at about 20 others with about 4,000 crore, 40,000 crores.
No, Mr. Lekhi, you're right.
The issue which I really want to raise is one.
No, you're right. He may have become the poster boy in that sense as far as his bad loan problem is concerned. He may be the soft target, even if you could call it that, as far as his bad loan problem is concerned, given the quantum and the magnitude of the problem that we're talking about. But in this specific case, sir.
Yes.
In this specific case, now that the matter has gone to the Supreme Court, what can we expect?
No, as far as the Supreme Court is concerned, they went to the Supreme Court to restrain him from going. He's already left. So that particular relief to that extent is now futile. Now, whether he's absconding or not is a question which cannot be answered easily, because the person is away doesn't mean he's absconded. The absconder has got a confluence of two factors. One, his not being there. The other is the intention not to return. I do not know whether he has the intention to return or not. And if he has the intention to return, the mere fact of his being absent will not necessarily make him an absconder. And as far as the banks are concerned, in fact, the relief that they are seeking is legally permissible. Yes, a garnishee order can be obtained, discovery may be obtained, but these are equitable reliefs. And as far as equitable reliefs is concerned, the bank has got a lot to answer. Why? Because the conduct of the bank itself is such, it puts a question mark on what they are seeking. And these are proceedings which have been pending for the past 4 years. The issue which arises is why this sudden urgency now, this pretended urgency now, when they could have taken appropriate action at the right time, and there was enough material with them, if their case is to be believed, to have immediately proceeded against Mallya. And the most strange part of this whole exercise is I just happened to read one of the CBI's comment. The CBI is telling the banks, and this is amazing. The CBI is telling the banks to declare the loans to be to declare the loans to be fraud. This is the first time I'm hearing an investigating agency telling a proposed complainant what the complaint is supposed to be. The issue here is the loans have been given. Yes, the question is due diligence should have preceded the giving of the loans. Now, due diligence preceded giving of the loans, and there is a default subsequent to the loans. The mere fact of the default doesn't necessarily suggest criminality.
Right.
And if we have to reach a stage where the CBI has to suggest what the case has to be made, then that point of time it doesn't augur well for the system, because first you have banks who are playing favorites with the people they want to proceed against. As far as the governmental agencies are concerned, they are completely silent as to the others against whom they have to proceed. And as far as the people are concerned, the people are obsessed with one individual, when in fact this is a systemic fraud which has to be dealt with comprehensively.
Sure, no one is disputing the systemic problem that we're dealing with, but KTS Tulsi respond to the points that were being made there by Aman Lekhi, and this is a point that Mr. Mallya in his press release has also made, that due diligence was carried out by SBI Caps. They found the business to be viable. Unfortunately, the business didn't turn out to do as well as it was expected to, and unfortunately, as Mr. Rothke has said to the court today, the business crashed. Businesses go sour.
No.
So the point...
No.
Yes.
The loan agreement of 2nd December 2009 is alleged to have been granted by the bank even when, at that time, Kingfisher had sacked over 100 pilots. It had already crashed. Now, either the information was withheld from the bank, or the bank is also complicit in ignoring this fact. But the fact that 100 pilots had already been sacked and this airline is folding up and you keep giving them more and more money, eyebrows are going to be raised that this was entirely a fraudulent transaction.
Well, eyebrows ought to have been raised
not
several...
two, but dozens of them.
Eyebrows ought to have been raised several years ago, sir. As Mr. Aman Lekhi pointed out, this is not a new development that has taken place as far as the Kingfisher matter is concerned. But let me ask the two of you, and Aman Lekhi, let me start by asking you, the court has issued a notice now. If Mr. Mallya were not to return, what will be the process going forward?
No, if Mr. Mallya doesn't return, I personally think, insofar as he's concerned, he'll have his lawyers will have a very difficult case before the court, because there are two aspects over here. One, there are agreements. There is a default where the agreement is current. The process is underway, and it has its consequences. So it is appropriate that the person against whom any action initiated appears and responds. His personal presence is something I really do not approve of. I don't see why his personal presence is actually required, because as long as there's a person who's available to respond on his behalf with his instructions, to insist upon personal presence, in my opinion, is totally unwarranted. And as far as the question of arrest is concerned, or for that matter, the other legal processes are concerned, arrests, as also the other processes, are extraordinary remedies. They are taken in exceptional circumstances after good cause is shown, and much has necessarily to be shown not only by Mallya but by the banks.
And you don't believe we're at that stage. And you don't believe we're at that stage yet.
No, we are jumping the gun. We have to see. What I read on the net was that Mr. Mallya has actually given a statement that he's just gone to England to spend time with his family. I do not know whether it's right or wrong. So as far as the intent is concerned and the facts available as of now, the intent is not to avoid the jurisdiction. If the intent is not to avoid the jurisdiction, a temporary absence from the place where he's supposed to be will not make him absconder. And I do not think that with the material presently with us, we can predict, unless of course we are clairvoyant, as to what's going to happen 2 weeks from now.
Well, we're not clairvoyant, and certainly we can't predict, but we can only take educated guesses on what we can expect the road ahead to be. So, KTS Tulsi, let me give you the final word as far as this matter is concerned. Now, if Mr. Mallya were to return, and if what Mr. Aman Lekhi is pointing out were to be the case, what would you see as being the next course as far as this matter is concerned? It's already being probed by the CBI. There's a current investigation underway by the Enforcement Directorate. We understand that it's not just Mr. Mallya, but the ED probe is now going to look at the role of the independent directors as well as key officials of the erstwhile Kingfisher. How do you see this playing out?
You know, I would like to believe in the good intent of Mr. Mallya, and that's the only way he can prove it is to make himself available with the agencies and either sort out the matter. He has sufficient resources to be able to sort out the matter. If the intention is not willfully defaulting, and if he doesn't sort out the matter, if he chooses to remain abroad, I can tell you that this case is not going away.
Okay.
There will be any amount, and I hope that the government's intent, if it is clear, then there can't be two laws, one for the rich and the other for the poor.
Sure.
They have to be dealt with in the same way. The only difference is that this one will have far more gravity as compared to the other persons who are prosecuted for a few thousand or a few lakh.
Sure.
The government must show its intent to live by its promise to the nation that we are going to, this is going to be our top priority, go after black money.
All right. Well,
They
this is
must
going to be
show
a matter
there
that the
now.
highest
Prove it to
court
them.
of the land is going to take a call on. Mr. Tulsi, Aman Lekhi, appreciate you joining us here on India Business Hour with your thoughts on the recent developments as far as the Vijay Mallya matter is concerned. But let's move on.